to give Winans Academy a
Hey,
shout
look,
out?
I mean, all week, I done told y'all what's up. And for some reason, y'all continue to come back and do the same thing that y'all did. I don't know what story y'all trying to get out of me. I don't know what image y'all trying to portray of me. But it don't matter what y'all think, what y'all say about me. Because when I go home at night, the same people that I look in the face, my family, that I love, that's all that matter to me. So y'all could go and make up whatever y'all want to make up, because I don't say enough for y'all to go and put anything out on me. But I'll come to y'all event, y'all shove cameras and microphones down my throat. But when I'm at home in my environment, I don't see y'all. But y'all mad at me. And if y'all ain't mad at me, then what y'all here for?
Actually, I'm not mad.
I ain't got nothing for y'all, though. I told y'all that, so y'all should know that. But y'all will sit here like right now and continue to do the same thing. I'm here preparing for a game, and y'all want to ask me all these questions, which is understandable. I could get down with that. But I told y'all, I'm not about to say nothing. So for the remainder of my, 3 minutes, because I'm here, I'm available for y'all. I'm here, I'm available for y'all. I done talked. All of my requirements are fulfilled. So now for this next 3 minutes, I'll just be looking at y'all the way that y'all looking at me. Thank you.
1992 at Super Bowl 27, I had an opportunity to talk to Tupac Shakur. This is real talk. When I played for the Jets, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and I understand. We had a conversation about the inner city and the problems there in the inner city. Is there anything you could tell us about your charity? Anything that you would like to get to
When I'm in them inner cities?
Yeah,
when I'm in them inner cities?
Yeah.
Come to them inner cities and come and holler at me then.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
I'm gonna hold you to that. I'm gonna hold you to that.
All right, African.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Marshawn, any statement you have about the league possibly buying you for your old beast mode gear that you like to wear? That's a statement for the league? You know, yesterday...
Y'all got 2 more minutes to look at me.
Yesterday, Chris Carter made the statement. He said he feels like you have the best possibility to make the Hall of Fame out of all active running backs. I just wanted to know if you had any thought on that, if you feel like your exchange with the media would have any impact on that. Understood. Understood. Anybody else?
Shout out Oakland, California.
How you feeling today?
Shout out Westbrook.
How's your mom doing?
Shout out my teammates.
Marshawn, can I give a shout out to Winans Academy, those kids who yell just not free football?
What's up, African? Shout out to my real Africans out there. Y'all got another minute to look at me, though.
But here's a story I'd like to tell. I'm looking out my window. There are 1,000 wolves outside my window. In those 1,000 wolves, and they all look alike, in those 1,000 wolves, I know that there are 100 of them that would be willing to give up their life to protect me. That they are respectful, they are humane in every sense of the word, and they would like to be one with me. I know that. There's no question in my mind that there's 100 out there. My only problem is I don't know where they are. My question is, do you think I want to go outside? Look, the reality of it is you are absolutely correct. There are only a few, and that's what we are witnessing in the United States of America today. The great majority of the people losing their jobs are peoples of European descent because black folk weren't given jobs. Black folk can't lose what they were never given. It's peoples of European descent that are losing their homes. It is women of European descent that have been denigrated by the European male. Remember, long before European males came upon African peoples to hurt, the first person they practiced their evil deeds on were women, European women. So I have no problem understanding that. And I respect and honor the human family, period. But you have to understand that by the nature of your similar phenotype and the fact that those wolves are going to come at me like they are one of the 100 that would protect me, and once they get to me, they will tear my body apart. You have to understand why I must hold you as one of the 900 until you prove to me that you are part of the 100.
Praise God, my son. You saved my. You're a Moor.
Yes, I am.
Why not? I have a ship.
Your ship? Forgive me, my lord. I don't mean to be critical, but you Moors don't make very good sailors.
You cannot save those people, Christian, but you can save me.
They're coming, Robin. Robin, come on!
Christian!
Why should I?
For pity's sake. Mine is a sentence of death.
No, Robin, he's a Moor. Don't listen to him.
Set me free. I will show you a way out.
I'd curse on Moors and Saracens. Were it not for their ungodly ways, Master Robin would never have left. What manner of name is Hazim? Irish? Cornish?
Moorish.
Look to her, Moor, if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived her father and made thee.
My life upon her faith.
Dance well, Moor. Starting to like this word more, less and less.
Oh, you're a Moor.
Yes, I have. Been one for years.
You're a Moor.
And a big one at that.
You're a Moor.
I am a Moor. My mother was Moor.
Check it out. For those that may be listening and looking at this, he was checking out the science of my shirt.
Of course.
You know,
You got it happening.
You got it happening.
Oh, you got it happening. What we have here is we have the Olmecs, right here.
He don't know nothing about that, man.
That's the Olmecs. So that
Who are the Olmecs?
Well, the Olmecs are some stone statues that were left in what is today Costa Rica and Panama. But it's proof that the Africans were in Northern America before Columbus. before Columbus and the Americans, which stands to reason because the Moors gave them the navigational instruments and the navigational knowledge to know where that stuff was first. But truthfully, the reason why the Portuguese started the slave trade, it made all the sense in the world because they were the first ones to know that stuff was over there. And Christopher Columbus, as we know of, Christopher Columbus was one of the first actual slavers to go up and down that coast. So it stands to reason. But actually he was lost.
Exactly.
He was lost, and he had Moorish captains, so he didn't know where he was or if he was even going to be able to re-find him. This night right here,
which one
is in the middle? That's Tutankhamun's sarcophagus. You gonna have to leave. Okay, you gotta leave, baby. If you can't be quiet. What's wrong with her?
Come on, let's go.
You got a baby. You can't laugh through this.
Come on.
What's wrong?
Excuse me.
What's wrong?
Let's go. Come on.
You gotta go home, but you gotta go out here.
I gotta go home.
Why?
So funny.
Oh,
You're so funny.
Got her captured.
Talk about
Right, me?
Wow, let me tell you.
Yeah. Where you from, babe?
Brooklyn.
No, your family.
Ethnicity.
Brooklyn, New York.
Ethnicity.
Yeah, American.
No, you're Italian, right?
Yeah.
All right. That's why about it.
Okay.
Yes, it's spiritual.
Okay, now
yeah, because
we're going to talk
Italians
about
don't
that
understand
because
how
you
black
know what? It's so
that was a spiritual
it is
reaction.
sad.
You're Sicilian, huh? Sicilian. You know, I read a lot, especially about things, about history. I find that shit fascinating. Here's a fact, I don't know whether you know or not. Sicilians were spawned by niggers.
Come again?
No, it's a fact. Yeah. You see, Sicilians have black blood pumping through their hearts. And no, if you don't believe me, you can look it up. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you see, the Moors conquered Sicily. And the Moors are niggers. See, way back then, Sicilians were like wops from northern Italy. They all had blonde hair and blue eyes. But, well, then the Moors moved in there and, well, they changed the whole country. They did so much fucking with Sicilian women, huh? That they changed the whole bloodline forever. That's why blonde hair and blue eyes became black hair and dark skin. You know, it's absolutely amazing to me to think that to this day, hundreds of years later, that Sicilians still carry that nigger gene. Now this, I'm quoting history. It's written. It's a fact. It's written.
I know this guy.
No.
Guy.
No. Your ancestors are niggers. Hey. Yeah. And your great-great-great-great-grandmother fucked a nigger. Oh, yeah. And she had a half-nigger kid. Now, if that's a fact, tell me, am I lying? 'Cause you're part eggplant.
Why do you think? I mean, why do you think they hide this from us? I mean, let's think about what you just broke down about the Olmec kids. Now, I'm gonna throw something at you.
Okay.
Do you know about Mount Rushmore?
No.
Mount Rushmore. Listen to the name. The rushing of the Moors.
Right.
Mount Rushmore, and you just talked about the Olmec kids.
Right.
Centuries later, what happens? They're gonna say these guys were here before.
Right.
The same way they did with this.
Right.
But we were already here. And it was funny that she was sitting there laughing because there's a movie, I do radio also.
The movie with
and I would
Christopher
love
Walken,
for you to get on this
he did the
radio
scene
show
where
with
he
me,
said, "You
man."
black Moors." I saw it.
Exactly. He said the
True
Sicilians
romance.
were spawned by niggas and
Yeah,
the Moors are niggas.
True
and it's like, why, you know, and they try to
True
suppress
romance.
it. And this is why I love what you said earlier about the whole internet piece, how we're pushing this stuff out on the internet. Also, I don't know, you heard Nas' new album?
No, I haven't.
You got to get it.
Okay.
He said the problem is he started thinking like the colonists. Noble Drew Ali started dropping their consciousness.
Okay.
So what happens? You on point with the whole Moors piece, and it's like we are actually maybe I could throw that out to these. We need to do a movie on the Moors.
Yeah. Well, that's ironic that you point that out, but that's the epic feature that I want to do.
I'm with you.
The epic, when I say epic feature, I mean the epic feature like you got Gladiator and you got Troy. In those movies, not 300. That was a cartoon.
Yeah,
but
I'm gonna hurt this guy.
Yeah,
he's funny.
I'm talking about historical.
I know.
You know, like Alexander. And,
yeah.
And that's one of my first goals is to do the Moors.
Anything you need on
as an epic, as an epic.
Okay.
So that's one of the projects. But back to this, and also Mount Rushmore is actually a knockoff of Ramses' tomb.
Exactly.
And it's a knockoff of the tomb that was actually moved because they were going to flood the Nile, so they moved it. It's actually a knockoff in stone because Africans were the only ones that worked in stone.
Exactly.
Africans taught the world how to work in stone. So it's just really a knockoff, just like the Washington Monument is a knockoff of Queen Hatshepsut's obelisk. And the obelisk...
That's history, people.
The obelisks from Queen Hatshepsut's actual temple, there are about 4 of them in existence. There's one that was man-made by Benjamin Banneker.
Big Ben Bey.
Right, whose father was actually Dogon, whose grandfather was Dogon. So he understood astrology, and he understood irrigation, and he understood those ancient arts. Thusly, that's why he wrote the first American almanac.
Almanac, exactly.
He was able to do that through that knowledge. But the obelisks were placed there by the Masons, who are outgrowth of the Kemetic mystery system.
Exactly.
So
we talking to a scientist.
Yeah. So there's interestingly, the obelisks. There's one in Washington D.C. which is a knockoff.
Yeah, we just came from there.
Okay, but there's one in front of the Champs Elysees in Paris. There's one in front of the Vatican. There's one in front of Scotland Yard. And there's one in Washington D.C. So how? And there's one in Central Park that no one knows is there. That was dedicated by the Moors. I mean, that was dedicated by the Masons. So here we got, millions of Africans from all around the world in New York City, and they don't know that the actual real obelisk that was at Queen Hatshepsut's temple is sitting unguarded, unprotected in Central Park at this moment as well.
Get the fuck out of here! No, I cannot. It's serious because it's very important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Inspector Coleman, you're the Inspector General for the Federal Reserve, right? Okay.
That's correct.
Have you done any investigations concerning the Federal Reserve's role in deciding not to save Lehman Brothers, which led to shockwaves that went through the entire financial system?
In that particular area, I don't generally comment on specific investigations, but we do not currently have an investigation in that particular area.
All right. What about the $1 trillion plus in expansion of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet since last September? Have you conducted any investigations regarding that?
Right now we have a, we call it a review, and so I don't know if the term investigation may have different connotations. So we're actually conducting a fairly high-level review of the various lending facilities collectively, which would include, the TALF, a variety of the different programs that are in process. So we're looking at them at a fairly high level to identify risk.
Well, I understand that, but we're talking about events that started unfolding 8 months ago. Have you reached any conclusions about the Fed expanding its balance sheet by over $1 trillion since last September?
We have not yet reached any conclusions.
Do you know who received that money?
For the... We're in the process right now of doing our review, and...
Right, but you're the Inspector General. My question to you specifically is, do you know who received that $1 trillion plus that the Fed extended and put on its balance sheet since last September? Do you know the identity of the recipients?
I do not know. We have not looked at that specific area at this particular point on those reviews.
What about Bloomberg's report that there are trillions of dollars in off-balance sheets transactions that the Federal Reserve has entered into since last September? Are you familiar with those off-balance sheet transactions?
I think it may be important at this point, too, just to bring up a certain aspect related to our jurisdiction. And just to clarify perhaps some of my earlier comments. We are the Inspector General for the Board of Governors, and we have direct oversight over board programs and operations, and are also able to look at board-delegated functions to the reserve banks, as well as the board's oversight and supervision of the reserve banks. We do not have jurisdiction to directly go out and audit reserve bank activities specifically. Nevertheless, in our lending facilities project, for example, we are looking at the board's oversight over the program, and to the extent that extends out to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
Well, I have a copy of the Inspector General Act here in front of me, and it says, among other things, that it's your responsibility to conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the programs and operations of your agency.
That's correct.
So I'm asking you if your agency has, in fact, according to Bloomberg, extended $9 trillion in credit, which, by the way, works out to $30,000 for every single man, woman, and child in this country. I'd like to know, if you're not responsible for investigating that, who is?
No, we have responsibility for the Federal Reserve's programs and operations, audits, to conduct audits and investigations in that area. In terms of who's responsible for investigating, would you mind repeating the question one more time?
What have you done to investigate the off-balance sheet transactions conducted by the Federal Reserve, which, according to Bloomberg, now total $9 trillion in the last 8 months?
I'll have to look specifically at that Bloomberg article. I'm not, I don't know if I have actually seen that particular one.
That's not the point. The question is, have you done any investigation or auditing of off-balance sheet transactions conducted by the Federal Reserve?
At this point, we're conducting our lending facility project at a fairly high level and have not gotten to a specific level of detail to really be in a position to respond to your question.
Have you conducted any investigation or auditing of the losses that the Federal Reserve has experienced on its lending since last September?
We're still in the process of conducting that review. Until we actually, go out and gather the information, I'm not in a position to really respond to the specific question.
So are you telling me that nobody at the Federal Reserve is keeping track on a regular basis of the losses that it incurs on what is now a $2 trillion portfolio?
I don't know if you're telling me that you're mentioning that there's losses. I'm just saying that we're not, until we actually look at the program and have the information, we are not in a position to say whether there are losses or to respond in any other way to that particular.
Mr. Chairman, my time is up, but I have to tell you honestly, I am shocked to find out that nobody at the Federal Reserve, including the Inspector General, is keeping track of this.
You brought this up a minute ago. We've heard very little about India until recently, but we see the U.S. kind of fighting this uphill battle because India is part of that Brics alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. How significant is Brics right now in terms of a threat to kind of the U.S. place on the world scene?
Well, the populations and the land mass of those areas is enormous. And certainly China has taken over the lead of economic development from all other countries. And India has had a good bit of development in professional tradable skills. And so it does have the potential of abandoning the use of the dollar, of leaving the Western financial mechanisms and clearing mechanisms. And this then is a direct threat to the exchange value of the dollar. So I think it does have the potential of forming a kind of trade relationship that undermines the ability of the United States to control all the outcomes. Washington is very control-oriented, and it has a lot of control because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, because of the tendency of the European countries to follow Washington's lead. And so it sees the Brics as a real challenge to Washington's ability to control outcomes. And so it will do whatever it can to break it up.
The word control that you're using there is an interesting word. I think it's a very accurate word, simply because for so many decades, the United States has kind of strong-armed a lot of these other nations, and that includes through a variety of means, including trade, including our willingness to import goods or to allow cheaper goods to be sold here, as well as when we talk about, some of these issues specific to emerging nations like India and like China, this idea of controlling foreign aid that goes out. Brics is in direct contrast to that, creating its own system of trade, as you talked about, and financial system for helping smaller developing nations so that they're not reliant on the United States. Are we watching U.S. control of a lot of these issues kind of falling through our fingers at this point?
Well, that's the potential. It's beginning to happen because Washington is picking on Russia, it's picking on China. And this is a mistake because they're very large and powerful countries. And so it does show that Washington is worried that it is going to see the world develop into more than a unipolar place where Washington calls all the shots. It's getting harder and harder for Washington to do that. And I think the kind of hegemonic policies that it's currently applying to Russia, that warns all the other countries that the same thing can happen to us. We've got to get out of that American system and have one of our own so that we are not subject to this economic bullying. So really what Washington is doing by trying to stop the rise of the Brics, it's actually encouraging them to hurry up and go forward faster.
It starts to create those unintended consequences. I wanted to...
Now, Greg, you had a very illustrious, amazing career. You uncovered a lot of stories, and I was wondering, throughout your career, what is one story that sticks out to you that you're most proudest of breaking?
Wow. I would say that the story that was the most difficult and the most heartbreaking is I uncovered that George Bush was involved in a gold mining company, Barrick Gold. And that gold mining company, to seize control of a gold mine in Africa, rolled bulldozers over the property to get rid of the small-scale miners that were there. But those miners are still in their mines. George Bush's company and Barrick Gold Mining buried alive 50 people. Wow. I covered that story, and that was tremendously dangerous, but mainly for my sources. One was charged with sedition. Others are beat up. Others have disappeared. It has been totally crushed in the United States and in Europe. This is the most harrowing story that I've uncovered. I've uncovered a lot of, important stuff. I don't want to dismiss things, like I found the inside documents for the plans for the oil fields of Iraq before the invasion by George Bush. I uncovered how Katherine Harris stole the election by wiping out black people off the voter rolls. I uncovered how BP had a blowout, and that was another story I'm very proud of that got really no coverage, got crushed in the United States. I put it on top of the BBC News, which is that 17 months before the Deepwater Horizon blowout, BP had a similar blowout for the same reason on another offshore rig in the Central Asian Republic of Azerbaijan. But they were able to cover it up through bribery and threats and everything else, and the U.S. media would not touch that story. BP knew that. They said they were shocked when their cement failed and the rig blew up and 11 people died and the Gulf Coast was destroyed. They said they were shocked. This had never happened. That's a complete, absolute lie. And I got arrested in Azerbaijan trying to cover that story. So, I've had a lot of very important stories. I would say that the burying those miners alive with George Bush's gold mining company, that was the most harrowing story. And I was threatened, my guardian was sued, I was threatened with lawsuits and ruin, and of course my sources were charged with crimes. They could have been hung. It was really grim.
Yeah. I think what you're doing is extremely important because you're covering news that the mainstream media won't touch or doesn't even have access to or even want to get near. And I was always wondering, from just watching it and observing it, how is it possible to find all these stories that nobody else is talking about? Do you have any tips and recommendations for the citizen journalists out there?
Yeah. Well, the great journalist, Yogi Berra, said, "It's amazing what you can see when you're looking." And that's the trick. You have to open your goddamn eyes. And you have to stop going to those fucking press conferences and rewriting press releases. We don't have reporters in America. We have repeaters. They go to those presidential press conferences, Obama said today, and, who cares? Who cares? They get the official news, the talking points. It makes me puke. It's the horse race. Oh, Hillary Clinton has a new pantsuit and a new hairstyle. You know what? I don't give a fuck about Hillary's hairstyle, okay? That's how it is. I don't care. I don't want to know, all right? What I do want to know is was there another blowout of an offshore oil rig before BP's Deepwater Horizon blowout, and there was. That's the stuff I'm going after. And you know what? They don't want to do that because they don't want to spend the money. They don't want to take the time. It's risky. You get sued. You get threatened by suits. I mean, you know, the New York Times would not touch the Barrick Gold story because they said, we'll get sued, but they have the same lawyer I did, Floyd Abrams. And he said, Times won't touch it because you got sued. They'll get sued. They'll spend $500,000 winning the suit, but, you know, they'll get scared off by it. So corporations are allowed to censor this crap. You know, so that would be, you know, you got to stop repeating. And so therefore, when you talk about citizen journalists, that's the only journalists. There are citizen journalists, and then there are corporate journalists. And I don't know of any corporate journalist which is producing anything. You know, Cy Hirsch, who uncovered the My Lai massacre with my friend Ron Ridenour, he was fired by the New York Times. You know, the great journalists do not survive in U.S. news. So one of my first recommendations is, you want to be a journalist? Don't go to fucking journalism school, okay, where they pull your brains out, where they hypnotize you and tell you to bleach your teeth and write in a reverse pyramid style. Okay, so screw that. Second, avoid taking jobs from these motherfuckers. Stay off their fucking payrolls. In other words, if you're going to work for the Times, you got to toe the line. If Seymour Hersh got fired, you'd get fired too. Dan Rather finally, for 1 minute in his life, repeated one of my stories that George Bush weaseled out of the war in Vietnam because his daddy got him into the Texas Air Guard. The one real story that Dan Rather did in his entire career, and he gets fired. Now he's worth $250 million to CBS. So you're never going to be able to do real stories if you work for these
It's been 3 years since the Fukushima disaster, and thousands in Japan have called on the government to rid themselves of all their nuclear power for good. Kevin, welcome to the program.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Kevin, what is the reality behind the radiation on the West Coast reaching California?
Well, any claims that it's not at dangerous levels need to be taken with a grain of salt, because it's been known for decades, and it's not me saying this, it's the U.S. National Academies of Science, that any exposure to ionizing radioactivity, no matter how small the dose, carries a health risk for cancer. And the higher your exposure to ionizing radioactivity, the greater the risk. And these risks accumulate for a lifetime. So,
well, are these government agencies being honest with the American people by saying that well, there's no threat, but clearly there is a threat?
I think there's a lot of secrecy, there's a lot of cover-up, there's a lot of minimization, and this goes back to the earliest days of the atomic age with the Manhattan Project. Incredibly enough, the same behavior takes place on the so-called peaceful atom side of the coin. So it's a constant battle to get the truth out. We have that battle here in the U.S. They certainly have the same battle in Japan.
Well, are they simply making these statements because they're trying to avoid panic?
I think more to the point is that the nuclear power industry here in the United States is very politically powerful, very economically powerful. They have a lot of friends in high places in government, including, of course, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Just today, there's breaking news that the NRC Office of Public Affairs knew a whole lot more about what was going on at Fukushima in the first days that they did not reveal to the American people. Here it is 3 years later, and through the Freedom of Information Act, finally more truth is coming out, but it took 3 years to get there in a prolonged, struggle with the NRC.
So it's been 3 years now. What have we learned?
Well, we've learned that this is a global catastrophe. You mentioned the other shoes that have not yet dropped at Fukushima Daiichi, and we pray that they don't. Those are the high-level radioactive waste storage pools. We're still not out of the woods with those. They're slowly moving the irradiated fuel out of the Unit 4 pool. That building is shattered by the earthquake, the tsunami, and a large-scale explosion. They've had to rebuild the building, essentially, and it took them from March of 2011 until November of 2013 to get that far. And only then could they begin to remove the fuel. It takes a 100-ton load, this waste transfer cask, to get the waste out of there. They're moving very slowly. They're about 20% of the way done with the job now since November.
So how are these storage pools constructed?
At the General Electric Mark I boiling water reactors, which is what you have at Fukushima Daiichi, the pools were designed for maximum convenience to the company. Move the irradiated fuel out of the operating reactor core into the storage pool, which is right next door. Unfortunately, that's 50 feet up in the air, which has meant they haven't been able to get that waste out of there in all this time. And the Unit 3 pool right next door, which suffered the worst explosion at Fukushima Daiichi 3 years ago, we don't even know the status of that pool or the waste inside, and we fear that the status is worse than at Unit 4. 50 tons of debris fell into the Unit 3 pool, likely doing damage to the fuel. So they're doing the easiest stuff first at Unit 4. They're going to run into problems at Unit 4 with damaged fuel, bent fuel, corroded fuel. They use salt water to cool the waste. That probably corroded the fuel. So there's difficulties to come just with that.
Now, what about the people of Japan? They're calling for closure of nuclear power plants there. How close is that to becoming a reality?
Well, actually, there are no operating reactors in Japan, and that's been the case pretty much for the last 3 years. There have been a couple of exceptions to that, but there are 48 still operable reactors across Japan. The 6 reactors at Fukushima Daiichi, the 4 were destroyed by the catastrophe, and 2 more that were not destroyed, the company chose to simply retire. So that took 6 reactors off of the table in Japan, but there are 48 still operable. And there's been this massive tug of war, to put it mildly, between the Japanese people and the pro-nuclear Japanese government that's under the influence of this industry. To this day, there are still no operating reactors, but Prime Minister Abe and his Liberal Democratic Party, it's their top priority to turn reactors back on, despite clear risks. Some of the reactors that they're looking to restart have earthquake fault lines directly beneath them, not nearby, under the plants. So it's a massive struggle. You're seeing protests in Japan of 250,000 people at the Prime Minister's residence, which is essentially unprecedented. There may have been protests like that in the 1950s for other issues like labor issues, but it's just incredible groundswell of public outpouring in Japan.
Kevin, what is the worst case scenario if we do not repair storage pools of high-level radioactive waste in the United States?
Well, the worst case scenario is a sudden drain down of the water. And this could happen if a heavy load is dropped into the pool, punching a hole in the floor, draining the cooling water away. It could also happen due to an earthquake or a tornado strike. So there's any number of scenarios that could quickly drain away the water in a high-level radioactive waste storage pool. After the cooling water is gone, it's also the radiation shielding for the workers. So the gamma dose rates near the pool would be instantly fatal at that point, which means people cannot approach the pool and take any mitigating actions. And that was a problem at Fukushima Daiichi, actually. That's why they tried to drop water into the pools by helicopter, and it did not go well at all. So within a matter of hours at that point, the fuel would reach its ignition temperature. The zirconium metal cladding on these tubes that contain the radioactive waste would catch fire. It would spread like a wildfire. It's exothermic, it's autocatalytic. You would have a massive radioactive inferno. And what's really incredible is at least atomic reactors have radiological containment structures around them. We saw at Fukushima Daiichi that they can be damaged, destroyed, still release massive amounts of radioactivity. The pools have no radiological containment structures around them. They're simply in industrial-like buildings. And at Fukushima Daiichi, those buildings were simply destroyed by the hydrogen explosions, rubbleized. So the pools at Fukushima Daiichi are open air. That kind of calamity could strike in the United States, as I said, due to an accident within the plant or a natural disaster.
So where are some of those most high-risk facilities in the United States? How many are there?
Well, we have still 100 operating reactors in the United States, and every single one of these reactors has a high-level radioactive waste storage pool. So this is all across the country. Another disaster scenario would be an intentional terrorist attack that directly targeted the pools.
So are there any in Florida or Boston?
Yes, indeed. In Florida, you've got the Turkey Point nuclear power plant near Miami. You've got St. Lucie nuclear power plant. You've got Crystal River, which thankfully is permanently shut down in terms of the reactor. But even at permanently shut down reactors, you still have the high-level radioactive waste stored on site, a lot of it, 75%, in the pools. And then up near Boston, you've got one of the most infamous atomic reactors in the country, Pilgrim, which we're hoping and praying the reactor will be permanently shut down. But again, you've got, at this point, every single nuclear fuel assembly ever irradiated in the core of that operating reactor stored in a Fukushima Daiichi twin design, one of these GE BWR Mark I's just outside of Boston.
So why is GE creating or designing pools that have this critical flaw?
That's a very good question. They did it for maximum convenience to the operator of the nuclear power plant. Not only are the pools fatally flawed in design, but the reactors and their containments themselves were, of course, fatally flawed, as we saw ×3 at Fukushima Daiichi. The containments around the atomic reactors were designed too small and too weak, very much just to save money for the purchasers of those atomic plants.
Does GE have any liability?
I think so. In fact, that recently there was a lawsuit filed in Japan by victims of this catastrophe, and it is seeking reparations from General Electric Corporation itself.
Now, let's go to the West Coast. This radioactive water now is heading towards U.S. shores. It will see the U.S. shores in about a month. How much danger does this pose to humans and wildlife? As we talked earlier, the government's saying it's not, but there are other individuals who are saying that it does. What's the reality here?
Well, Fukushima is a catastrophe for the oceans like none we've ever seen before. I mean, Chernobyl was a horrible nuclear catastrophe, but it was more inland, and certainly the Dnieper River flows into the Black Sea and then into the oceans. Fukushima is delivering at this point something like 80,000 gallons per day of radioactively contaminated groundwater into the Pacific Ocean, which then flows our way. It also bioconcentrates in the ecosystem, in the food chain. So this claim that there's no harm to wildlife, I mean, one of the worst data points, so to speak, was in August of 2011, just months after this thing began, when bluefin tuna contaminated with radioactive cesium-137 in their flesh had swam across the Pacific to the west coast of North America, contaminated with Fukushima fallout. They simply swam faster than the ocean currents have carried it. Now the ocean currents are bringing it inevitably to our shores. And I mentioned, 80,000 gallons per day. That's on a good day. They have 150 million gallons of highly radioactive water in storage at Fukushima Daiichi, whatever they can capture. They've had big leaks. Just 10, 15 days ago, they leaked 100 tons of highly radioactive water onto the ground, which then flows into the ocean. They're having these big leaks on a fairly regular basis at this point.
Now, you mentioned the tuna. Well, what about the food industry that creates and harvests tuna from the sea? How is the food industry affected, and are they doing any testing?
They're doing woefully inadequate testing, and in fact, U.S. regulations are much weaker than Japan's. So Japan has a standard of 100 becquerels per kilogram of radioactive cesium in food. That's 100 radioactive disintegrations per second, ongoing, in 2.2 pounds of food. Here in the United States, our standard is 1,200 becquerels of cesium per kilogram of food. Our standard is 12 times weaker. It means that we could be importing food unfit for human consumption in Japan, and it's perfectly legal to serve it to children on the dinner table here in the United States.
So then what's the impact to us if we eat this food?
Any exposure to ionizing radiation carries a health risk for cancer, and those risks accumulate over a lifetime. And there's no following of the health damage that's being done from this contamination of the food supply. And unfortunately, epidemiological science, if it ever gets around to looking at this question, is much less powerful than our ability to inflict cancer upon ourselves. So, cancers don't wear a little flag that says, I was caused by Fukushima fallout. They try to figure that out later, and it's very difficult to do that. So prevention is where it's at, and that is not happening in the United States.
Now,
Could I ask our Capitol Police to help restore order here? You know, could someone find out where the Capitol Police is? What's that? You know,
in the name of the people of Cambodia, in the name of the people of Laos.
I'd like to say to my colleagues and to our distinguished witnesses this morning that I've been a member of this committee for many years, and I have never seen anything as disgraceful and outrageous and despicable as the last demonstration that just took place about, you know, you're going to have to shut up or I'm going to have you arrested. If we can't get the Capitol Hill Police in here immediately, get out of here, you low-life scum.
McCain, of all people. Yeah, McCain. You know the story about McCain. McCain would have been in jail, or maybe in the lecture chair had it not been for Dick Nixon. You know the story?
No, I didn't know it. Wow, he killed a lot of people.
He was the worst traitor since Benedict Arnold. When he was captured over in Hanoi, he told on everybody, man. He made tapes to say, I'm a war criminal. I dropped bombs on schoolhouses and killed children and women. That was him. He wasn't lying, but but to show you how the good old white boy hangs up, none of them talk about it. When they debating it, man, the debate gets hot. They never call it Democrats nor Republicans. That's that old white boy thing, huh?
But he was even born in this country. He was born in Panama, and also he's a traitor to the country. And they always talk about Obama not being born here and being a traitor.
Yeah, but that's white privilege. That's white privilege.
Now, McCain says again that he was captured and tortured, which isn't the case. After he was captured in Hanoi in a pond, he landed in a small lake. He was bayoneted in the groin area, and they pulled him out, and he was thrown into a cell. About the fourth day in a cell, without any kind of attention at all, they realized who he was. His father was the Admiral of the Pacific Fleet. And because of that, they rushed him off to a hospital, they fixed him up, and from what I've been able to learn, and you can see this readily on the web as well, he had his own nurse, which happened to be an attractive female, and I'm sure she provided services above and beyond just taking his temperature. In either case, he was offered early release, which he turned down because he knew that those folks that were released early were ratters. They had spilled the beans. And apparently that's what he did as well. According to what we've been able to determine, he provided the flight path of incoming fighters on bombing runs. And needless to say, they were shot down. He also provided the radio frequencies and the call signs so the Viet Cong could actually listen in to the pilot's chatter. Now, he landed on an aircraft carrier called the Intrepid. And on that aircraft carrier, he landed with, I don't know how many feet of power line. He was playing, I guess, to show off how great of a pilot he is, and he was ducking down below the power lines, and some lines got hooked on the tail of his aircraft, which he had no way of getting rid of. Now, there's an aircraft carrier called the Forrestal, and when he was assigned to that particular aircraft carrier, he, as he was entering his cockpit, he inadvertently released a bomb. And the aircraft carrier was just re-equipped with weapons, so there was a lot of aircraft parked, fully armed, and a fire ensued. It took, I don't know, better part of, I guess, a day or 2 days to put the fire out. And in the interim, 134 sailors died. Now, what's interesting about McCain, he did graduate from the Naval Academy. And as I said, his father was an admiral of the Pacific Fleet during the Vietnam conflict. His grandfather was also an admiral. So you'd think that he would apply himself while he was at the academy. And he stood fourth. Well, the problem is he stood fourth from the end. And there was, what, I think just under 900 midshipmen in his graduating class. So you have to ask yourself, how is it that he got into a cockpit? That's a real good question. And the answer, I believe, is because of his father being an admiral. One pilot would never be selected if he was at the bottom of 900 graduates. I mean, that just would never happen. And if he wouldn't have been in an airplane, then those sailors on the forestall wouldn't have given up their lives. Now, what's also interesting about McCain is when he was learning how to fly, he had difficulty there as well. I think he was somewhere around Houston when he developed spatialist orientation, and that's when you don't know what's up. In other words, you're totally lost in a three-dimensional world. And he chose to eject out of an aircraft. And he landed safely. I guess that time he did protect his arms. Later on, he ejected from another airplane that he said he had engine malfunctions. So he was down 2 airplanes, and then the 3rd airplane was on the forestall that got destroyed. And then he got shot down over Hanoi in the A-4 Skyhawk because he was flying too low. That's what we've been able to ascertain. Now, so here you have someone that was a traitor, and he tries to come across as being a war hero. And he's had a good run. And if you go look at some of my other videos, I had asked people to write to him to let him know that we know what he was all about. It's truly amazing that someone like him that did what he did, that cost the lives of so many unfortunate sailors, ends up being regarded as a hero and lives pretty much a life of luxury. He also ended up marrying Budweiser. His wife has the Budweiser franchise for Arizona. And if you recall, when he was asked how many homes he owned, he had no clue. I believe they owned 5. But he had no idea how many homes they even owned. And here's a guy that's a senator, a lawmaker. He likes to regard himself or think of himself as a maverick. He likes to think of himself as a deal maker. The problem is the deals that he makes usually don't benefit his constituents. He tends to cross over to the other side an awful lot. McCain needs to retire. In 2016, he'll be 80 years old. And I got to believe that a lot of his marbles got scrambled quite a while ago. But what I want you to do is I want you to do your own research. Don't believe everything that I've said. Go look up the songbird of the Hanoi Hilton, and you'll learn what I learned.
Something like a sketch. I ain't black, said the man to the kettle. Ruby heart with some emeralds for the bezel. Can't settle. We ascending to that next level. On the way up, I say peace, devil. My metal is verbs and nouns. Peace Apollo, catch me in Rio, bending them sounds. Got the soul by the pound, let it cook for a while. Speaker serving that loud. Now you loving our style, magic cow like Houdini with a beanie, really affairs. And the graffiti in the city, hieroglyphics, you dig? Asleep, sipping Kool-Aid, eating ribs awake. The Moors back, putting together the pyramids, my lord. Last shall be first if I'm recalling. If this ain't prophecy, then we living in what you call it. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice is the calling. You witnessing the rise of the fallen, what up? Woo. In the Chi-Town, they saying what up? What up? What up? Reporting live from the rich, and we saying what up? with a finger to the sky. Only half off that 3005. The wizardry is cold, I promise not a lie. Jedi, dropping jewels that I picked up from Atlantis. Got the game from Bata, that led to overstanding. Captain with 7 rings, we here to say the planet. Hey dude, in the flesh, devil screaming, God damn it. The weapons can't damage, straight jamming when you aim. Tried everything you could, and yet we still remain. Peace to all my brethren, we see Babylon in flames. Don't wanna feel the fire, they quit playing with our names. The last shall be first if I'm recalling. If this ain't prophecy, then we living in what you call it. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice is the calling. We witnessing the rise of the fallen.